Jannik Sinner is staring into the abyss, and if he doesn't evolve right now, Carlos Alcaraz might just leave him in the dust forever. The numbers don't lie. 3,150 ranking points separate the king, Carlos Alcaraz, from the chaser, Jannik Sinner. Half a year back, that margin was barely 1,000. 3 months ago, about 1,500. Now it has ballooned past 3,000 and counting. But Sinner shouldn't be losing sleep over the math. He should be terrified of the reality behind it. We're talking consecutive beatdowns by Alcaraz, confessions of a slump, and a desperate attempt to mimic Carlos's flair, all compounding into a mental burden that gets heavier every single week. It brings us to the whisper echoing through the locker room, the question hanging in the air. What if this is it? What if Jannik's absolute peak simply cannot touch Carlos when he's firing on all cylinders? Are we witnessing the death of a rivalry and the birth of a dynasty? Look at the tape from Doha, 2026. Alcaraz storms to the title, flawless, pushing his record to 12-0. Sinner, sent packing in the quarters by Jakub Mensik, a 20-year-old kid sitting at number 16. This wasn't a bad bounce or a tight three-setter. It was a straight sets dismantling where Sinner looked nothing like a 4-time major champion. That stark difference, Alcaraz looking untouchable, while Sinner fumbles against guys he used to eat for breakfast. That is the narrative of early 2026. And it is no fluke. This trend began late in 2025, and it is not slowing down. Just look at the head-to-head stats. They are absolutely savage. Carlos has taken the last 5 encounters, 5 in a row. The latest dagger was the French Open final in 2025 straight sets. No mercy. Before Paris, it was Indian Wells. Before that, another humbling. Every loss is a hammer blow to Sinner's self-belief. Every win makes Alcaraz feel more invincible. You have to go all the way back to the ATP Finals in 2024 to find Sinner's last triumph. That was over a year ago, a lifetime in this sport. Back then, they stood eye to eye. Since that moment, Alcaraz has launched into the stratosphere, while Sinner has stalled, maybe even slipped backward. The math is cruel. The gap widens because Carlos is stacking up points with trophies. Jannik is hemorrhaging points by failing to defend his turf. Take the Australian Open. Sinner bowed out in the semis. Alcaraz lifted the cup. That point swing was colossal. Then in Doha, Carlos wins, Jannik exits early. The chasm grows. If this keeps up, Carlos deep in the draw, Jannik crashing out against underdogs, we could see a 5,000-point divide by summer. That is not a gap. That is an entirely different area code. Sinner would need a miracle Carlos totally collapsing while he goes on a historic tear just to sniff the top spot again. Future projections are grim. The Sunshine Double is approaching Indian Wells and Miami with 1,000 points on the line for each. If Alcaraz sweeps and Sinner stumbles, you are looking at another 1,500 to 2,000 point shift. Then we hit the dirt. Clay season. Carlos's playground. Monte Carlo, Barcelona, Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros. If the Spaniard dominates the red clay and the Italian falters, that lead could explode to 6,000 or 7,000 points by June. At that stage, Sinner is fighting for scraps with the rest of the pack, rather than challenging for the throne. Imagine the mental toll. Watching your nemesis pull away week after week, no matter how hard you grind, is soul-crushing. It warps your mindset, destroys your self-image, and shifts the entire narrative in the press. The mental game is where the real danger lies, because Jannik has practically confessed that Carlos is living rent-free in his mind. Julien Beneteau put it bluntly. Carlos has cracked Jannik's code, forcing him to reinvent his style just to keep up. In the world of elite sports, that is the kiss of death. The moment you abandon your instincts to mimic a rival, you have lost. You are no longer the predator, you are the prey. You are playing scared. And history tells us exactly how this movie ends. Once a player establishes that kind of mental stranglehold at this level, the grip almost never loosens. Federer never truly solved the Nadal puzzle on clay. Djokovic held a mental edge over Nadal in hard-court finals that lasted a lifetime, regardless of form. That psychological edge feeds on itself. Sinner admitting to a slump is just the tip of the iceberg. He knows he is off. He blames the body. He blames the tactics. But he is missing the elephant in the room. Deep down, he doesn't believe his A game is enough to take down Alcaraz anymore. So he is panic adjusting. And that shift is ruining him against the rest of the field. Twist your game to beat one man, and you forget who you are. Jannik's DNA is pure ball striking, taking it early, painting the lines, and crushing it from the baseline. That signature style is the engine that drove him to capture 4 majors. It is the very foundation that crowned him #1 in the world. But look at him now, chasing drop shots, forcing the net game, scrambling for variety. He is watering down the superpowers that made him lethal without actually mastering these new tricks. The strategic pivot Sinner is attempting is a high-wire act with no safety net. He is trying to download a lifetime of flair, creativity, volleys, the touch skills that flow out of Alcaraz like breathing. Carlos has been painting lines like that since he was a kid. You cannot just learn that overnight. Sinner is trying to reinvent the wheel at 23 years old, all while grinding through a brutal tour calendar and facing elite killers every week. That is a mountain almost nobody climbs successfully. It is grueling and rarely ends well. History is littered with cautionary tales of players who tweaked their game to topple a nemesis and ended up breaking what worked. They dulled their own blade against the field and still couldn't cut through their rival. Jannik is flirting with that exact disaster, becoming a shadow of himself while remaining unable to solve the Alcaraz puzzle. And then the body starts to rebel, compounding every single issue. His entire identity is built on aggressive timing, taking the ball early, flattening it out, and bullying opponents from the baseline. That style demands physical perfection. It worked when he was flying high, but now, carrying the heavy mental baggage of those losses to Alcaraz, the legs feel slower and the lungs burn hotter. Bouncing back takes longer. Keeping that red line intensity for 3 hours drains the tank faster than ever before. On the flip side, Alcaraz looks like he is carved out of granite. The guy is getting stronger, and his serve has turned into an absolute monster. 82% first serves in, winning 89% of those points. Those numbers are terrifying, especially when combined with his elite court coverage. He proved he can keep his engine redlining for 5 hours straight when he went toe-to-toe with Zverev. Every physical metric is flashing green for him. While Jannik battles fatigue and slumps, the service stats paint a brutal picture of the difference between them. Alcaraz tweaked his motion and suddenly found an extra 5 to 8 miles per hour on the radar gun. He is collecting free points and breezing through service games with zero stress. Sinner's delivery is solid, sure, but it is stagnant. It is the same old tool in the shed, reliable, but flat. Carlos is sharpening his sword daily, and in the tight moments, that evolution decides the winner. Then you look at the medical charts, and it gets worrying for the Italian's future. His high-octane baseline bashing is charging a heavy tax on his body. Hips acting up, wrists flaring, it is a laundry list of nagging pains that simply accumulate over time. Sure, Carlos has had his knocks, but he manages the load better. Plus, his game built on variety and finishing at the net might actually save his legs more than Jannik's relentless grinding. The scoreboard in the majors is starting to look lopsided. 7 slams for the Spaniard at just 22 years old. Sinner sits at 4 titles at age 23. A 3-slam gap is big, but the direction of travel is what should scare his camp the most. Alcaraz is stacking trophies at warp speed, grabbing 3 in 2024 alone. Jannik took 2 that year, but hasn't touched silverware since. If Carlos keeps this cadence bagging 2 or 3 a year while Jannik stalls at 0 or 1, the math gets ugly, fast. Fast forward to 2028, and Alcaraz could be sitting on 13 to 15 slams in his mid-20s. Sinner might be stuck at 6 or 7. Once that chasm opens up, even a late-career bloom won't be enough. Closing an 8 or 9 slam deficit? That is virtually impossible. The history books are clear. Once you let a rival get that far ahead in your prime, you are chasing a ghost you will never catch. Then there is the surface problem. Alcaraz is a chameleon. He dominates on hard courts, conquers the clay, and owns the grass. He has already completed the career Grand Slam. Sinner is still hunting for a major trophy on anything that isn't a hard court. His runs in Australia are legendary, no doubt, but his winning map is a lot smaller than his rivals. That versatility gifts Alcaraz 4 legitimate shots at glory every single year. Sinner is realistically pinning his hopes on just 2, Melbourne and New York. Roland Garros has become a house of horrors for him. 2 finals, 2 heartbreaks, both delivered by Alcaraz. That 2025 final where he clawed back 3 match points only to crumble is the stuff nightmares are made of. Can he really walk back onto that clay and beat the guy who owns the place? The guy who has already lifted that cup twice? The mental wall is sky high. When the lights are brightest, Alcaraz has a steel trap mind that Sinner hasn't matched. Look at the Australian Open against Zverev. Alcaraz was dead and buried, yet somehow rose from the grave to win from 5-4 down. Or Doha against Rublev, saving 6 match points like it was nothing. That is the DNA of a legend. Carlos is essentially Houdini. He escapes impossible traps. Sinner's track record in 5-set wars tells a tragic tale. In matches stretching past 3 hours and 50 minutes, he is 0 for 9, 0 wins, 9 crushing losses. When the marathon enters the final mile, Jannik hasn't shown the kick to cross the line first. It is physical, it is mental, but mostly, it is a haunting pattern, not just bad luck. The comparison in clutch moments is absolutely brutal. When both men are staring into the abyss, Alcaraz finds another gear while Sinner fades. It is not an insult to say it. It is a cold, hard fact driven by the data, implying that betting against Alcaraz in a dogfight is a fool's errand, no matter what the scoreboard says. Let's talk about the masterminds behind the scenes, because the coaching dynamic adds a whole new layer of intrigue. In one corner, Samuel Lopez is guiding the Spaniard, sharpening that raw, explosive creativity into a lethal weapon. Meanwhile, the Italian relies on the tactical genius of Darren Cahill and Simone Vagnazzi, absolute titans of the trade. Yet, you can have the best strategists on the planet, but they can't excise the ghosts from your mind once an opponent has set up permanent residence in your psyche. It begs the terrifying question, what card is left to play? What magic trick have Cahill and Vagnazzi missed? These men are legends, architects of 4 major titles, yet even their combined wisdom has hit a brick wall when faced with the riddle of the Spaniard. If a full year of brainstorming by the sport's finest minds yields nothing, we have to consider the chilling possibility that there is no solution. Then you add the crushing weight of the media machine, spinning a narrative that buries the Italian deeper. Headlines scream about the Spaniard's destiny, painting him as a god among men, the 22-year-old on the verge of immortality with a career Grand Slam. Meanwhile, the ink spilled on Sinner tells a tragic tale of decline, obsessing over his stumbles and his desperate inability to keep pace. That kind of noise seeps into your soul, rotting your confidence and dictating your worth to sponsors who bet on winners, not runners-up. The Spaniard's brand is exploding. Luxury fashion houses and global empires are lining up to throw money at the new king. Sinner isn't hurting for cash, sure, but the chasm is growing. As one star goes supernova, the other flickers. Money talks, and it's saying who's boss. Forget the birth certificates, Sinner is only 13 months older, but on the court, the Spaniard is light years ahead in evolution. He is a finished product, deadlier, more adaptable, and possessing a mental fortress that seems unshakable. For the Italian to close that distance while his rival is still sprinting forward, that is a task bordering on the impossible. And don't look now, but there are sharks in the water. It is a 2-horse race today, but the next wave is already cresting. Hungry young guns like Arthur Fils and Holger Rune, kids aged 19 to 21, are sharpening their teeth. Give them 2 or 3 years to ripen, and Sinner finds himself in a nightmare scenario, chasing a ghost ahead while fighting off the pack biting at his heels. That is a war on 2 fronts that few survive. The numbers don't lie, and they are painting a grim picture. The Spaniard's dominance is charting vertically. Reaching 12 finals in his last 13 events is the stuff of legend. He has strung together 30 consecutive victories on outdoor hard courts, with every single data point screaming unbeatable. Conversely, Sinner's stats are bleeding out, win rates dropping, ranking points evaporating, and finals appearances becoming a rarity. Even his record against the elite is tanking. The trajectories aren't just diverging, they are running away from each other. Turning this ship around demands drastic action. Fire the team, rebuild the swing from scratch, vanish for a sabbatical. Something radical must break the pattern. Yet the Italian stays the course, tweaking a system that has clearly hit its ceiling, hoping for a different result. Make no mistake, Sinner is elite. Bagging 4 Grand Slams by age 23 is nothing to sneeze at. He will lift more trophies, He will likely walk into the Hall of Fame with maybe 6 or 8 majors to his name. But will he ever sit on the throne again? Will he ever stand eye to eye with the Spaniard as a true equal? The cold, hard truth is leaning towards no. And this isn't a story of failure. It is a story of witnessing an anomaly. The Spaniard is operating at a frequency that makes the big three look slow at his age. Sinner is excellent, but his rival is transcendent. And in the brutal calculus of sport, transcendence devours excellence every single time. That is the tragedy. You can do everything perfectly and still lose. Sinner is grinding. He is refining his craft. He has the best team money can buy. But guess what? The guy across the net works just as hard and has a team just as good. The difference is the starting line. The Spaniard was born with a head start and runs faster. The door is slamming shut. With every trophy the Spaniard hoists while Sinner falters, the mountain gets steeper. The mental burden becomes crushing. The points gap becomes an ocean. The story becomes history. And we might already be past the point of no return. Permanence sets in. That is the bitter pill the tennis world has to swallow. The great war that was supposed to define the 2020s? It might have ended before the opening shots faded. Not because the Italian crashed, but because the Spaniard soared to a stratosphere where oxygen is too thin for anyone else. Once the mind accepts defeat, the body follows. We may never see them level again. Sinner is destined for second place, simply because the man in first can only be stopped by injury or old age. And at 22, old age is a lifetime away, meaning Sinner's golden opportunity might have vanished while he was busy tying his shoes. But I want to hear from you. Is this gap bridgeable, or has the ship officially sailed? What miracle does the Italian need to pull off to level the playing field? Sound off in the comments below. Smash that subscribe button for more deep dives into the rivalry that died on the vine. Catch you in the next one.